Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope that your day is off to a good start. Mine is so far. Man, what a pretty day it is out here. If you've been here the last several weeks, you know that I'm in the process of just working my way through the Bible. Taking each week a book, or more often several books, and just sort of popping the hood on them and just going over sort of who wrote them, a rough time frame for when they were written, what the contents are, and if anything, hopefully I'm encouraging you to turn to some of these books and read them for yourselves. For today, we are doing just one book. We're just getting to Isaiah. We did Psalms in the Psalms we did by itself, and Isaiah will do by itself. Isaiah is thought by a lot of people to be the greatest of the writing prophets. If Elijah is the greatest non-writing prophet, there's not a book of Elijah in the Bible. If he's the greatest of the non-writing prophets, a lot of people would say that Isaiah is the greatest of the writing prophets. Which there's not a, that's always a matter of opinion. So, in terms of where we are in the Bible, we've done the law, the first 5 books, Genesis through Deuteronomy. We have done most of the books now that the Hebrew canon refers to as the writings. And today we get to the first of the prophetic books, as we Christians call them. As a reminder, the Hebrew canon is ordered differently. If you pick up a Jewish edition of the Old Testament, and I actually encourage you to do that, it's the same books, and here and there the translation will have a little bit different flavor, but I encourage you to pick up a copy of a Jewish translation. It's called the Tanakh. They order their Old Testaments differently. Law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, prophets, and prophets in this case are all of the historical books and the books that we call the prophets, and then the writings. And the writings in the Hebrew canon are Psalms, the books attributed to or associated with Solomon, Job, Chronicles is included in the writings, and curiously enough, the book of Daniel is included in the writings. But anyway, we get today to Isaiah, perhaps the greatest of the writing prophets. So a little bit about Isaiah himself. Isaiah had a very long prophetic ministry. Some 60 years. In Isaiah 6, we get a great clue to the starting point of his prophetic ministry. Isaiah 6, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. That's his call to prophetic ministry. And the end of his prophetic ministry is during the reign of King Manasseh. So you're looking at about 60 years, from roughly 740 BC to about 680 BC. By tradition, the tradition is that he was martyred during the reign of the evil King Manasseh. So that is the prophet himself. Oh, one more thing to mention about Isaiah, the prophet himself. He was very much a court prophet. Some prophets were out in the wilderness, and they came into the court or came into a city once in a while, and they were looked at like they were wild-eyed crazy man. That's not Isaiah. Isaiah is always in and around the courts. He's always in and around the courts, always has the king's ear. So, for the book itself, Isaiah is referred to 22 times in the New Testament, quoted 22 times in the New Testament. It is the longest of the prophetic books, 66 chapters, which accounts for why it is listed first in amongst the writing prophets. There are in Isaiah 3 broad sections, 1 through 39, 40 to 55, and then 56 to 66. And if you read all the way through it, and to sit down and read all the way through it, it would take you a while, but you would pick up on some things. That the first section, 1 through 39, is obviously addressed to Isaiah's own era. It's addressed, we have frequent references to various kings, and it is obviously set before the Babylonian exile. In 37, 38, and 39, Isaiah is talking frequently with the righteous King Hezekiah. So there's that. That is anchored in time. 40 to 55 is different. From chapter 40 onward, we don't see references to specific Jewish kings. We don't see specific references even to the prophet's own name. And that section from 40 to 55 is clearly addressed. If you read through it, there are numerous places that really seem to point to a community that's in exile. And then from 56 to the end, those visions, those passages, are to a community after the exile, and some of them are really timeless. And so you have a book that is written by someone who we can nail down definitively in time. It's possible, it's very easy to nail down definitively in time when Isaiah lived. That's easy. He's referred to, the prophet Isaiah is referred to both in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. He's quoted numerous times in the New Testament. It is easy historically to nail down when the prophet Isaiah lived. The tricky part with Isaiah the book, is nailing down the authorship. The straightforward traditional answer is that the historical prophet Isaiah wrote the whole book. That is the traditional answer, but it is tricky because you've got a book written by somebody in and around 700 BC, who seems to be addressing a people who lived much later. In particular, Isaiah twice refers to King Cyrus by name, and Cyrus being the Persian king who would issue the edict allowing exiles to return home. But Cyrus lived 150 years after the prophet Isaiah. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this? How do we handle this? There are several different ways that we can look at it. One is that the historical Isaiah, the prophet, wrote the whole book, and he was simply given divine insight into things that would happen after his lifetime. That is certainly possible. And I tend to stick with, in terms of an authorship for a book, I tend to go with whatever the traditional view is, unless I have really good reason to doubt it. So, Isaiah, the historical figure, was given divinely by God insight into what would happen long after his lifetime, or there were 2 or 3 different people who wrote what we now know of as Isaiah. The most common view of it, if you hold to multiple authors, is you have 3 authors. Isaiah, the historical prophet, a second Isaiah from 50 to 40 to 55, and then a third one from 56 to 66. Another school of thought has that the book was largely written by the historical prophet, but was edited over time with slight additions here and there, made years later by subsequent priests or prophets who sort of operated in, like, I guess, in a school of Isaiah. One thing to consider when looking at the authorship of the book is even the oldest scrolls of Isaiah, the very oldest one, dates back to like 150 BC, or give or take a little bit. And even that far back, Isaiah is one scroll. There aren't divisions in it. Isaiah is a massive book. It's the longest of the prophets, but it's a massive book. And there is so much in there that we should read. So much in there that has seeped into our hymns, into popular imagination. A lot of Isaiah is messianic. There are portions that are apocalyptic. At Christmas, and in 6 weeks, we'll be celebrating Christmas. At Christmas, we all read from Isaiah 9. And the government shall be upon his shoulder, and he shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Or Isaiah 7:14, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel. Also associated with Christmas, we have the famous vision of the peaceable kingdom in Isaiah 11. Isaiah is famous for the servant songs. There are 4 of these. First few verses of 42, first few verses of chapter 49, early part of chapter 50, and then 52:13 to 53:12, and this last of the servant songs, we as Christians know well, because as Christians we cannot help but see Jesus in that. From Isaiah 53, surely is borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and with his wounds we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Or from Isaiah 40. Speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem that her warfare is ended, that she has received double from the Lord's hand for all her sins. And from the end of Isaiah 40, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall rise up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not faint. Early part of Isaiah speaks very forcefully to the main problems that the people had. The main problems that the people had in the Old Testament, and there were two of them: idolatry and cruelty. Over and over again, Isaiah hits those two themes hard. And in Isaiah 1, we see very clearly and powerfully to me a statement about just justice and injustice. People a lot of times want to know, how does God want me to live my life? What is God's will for how I live my life? And if you want a simple answer to how God wants you or me to live our lives, it comes from Isaiah chapter 1, 16, 17. This is what Isaiah says, and to me this is a great summary of how we should live. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, correct oppression, defend the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, correct oppression, defend the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. Or we could summarize it: stop doing evil things and learn to be good. Pursue what is just and what is fair. Right wrongs. Where you see a wrong being committed, right it. And stand up for and defend the little guy. Stand up for the person that cannot stand up for himself or herself. I love that. I love this short passage. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, correct oppression, defend the fatherless, and plead the widow's cause. So for those of you who want to know what the will of God is for your life, that's a really good place to start. And it's a really good place for us to end our brief foray into the great prophet Isaiah. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.